It's like something from a Hollywood horror movie. A hospital where patients are given massive doses of drugs like LSD, intensive shock therapy, put to sleep for months at a time. But at Montreal's Allan Memorial Institute, the nightmare was all too real. And incredibly, what happened there was secretly supported by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency and the Canadian government.
When we got there, the place was just like a scene from One Flew Out of the Cuckoo's Nest. There were people banging their heads on the walls and droning, and my mother was sitting there completely drugged up. And even as a child, I knew that she wasn't right. It just doesn't make sense that you can take a mother away from her children and ruin her life, and that other people won't be affected too. There were people banging their heads on the walls and droning, and my mother was sitting there completely drugged up. And even as a child, I knew that she wasn't right.
What they didn't know at the time was that her mother, Ellen McIntosh, and hundreds of others like her were unwitting guinea pigs in brutal psychiatric experiments that took place at the Allan Institute under the code name MKUltra.
Who did you meet with in the safe house?
The CIA man overseeing the project was John Gittinger.
There was continued pressure put upon anybody within the agency in connection with trying to explain or understand brainwashing. So we were charged with rather an elaborate attempt to try to find out chemical, psychological, any kind of means that people could use to influence the behavior of the people.
They promised me that I would get rested. I was told that I would be looked after in the hospital. That was hell. It really was. It's something that you can't describe. And when I start talking about it, I start shaking. My body shakes. It's like my body's saying, don't go there. That's you. Yeah. Look how dark my hair is. I don't think that. Electroshock and a picture of Dr. Cameron, but I do remember him. I remember his voice very clearly.
What do you remember about it?
He sat me in front of a group of medical students or doctors that were doing their residency, and he said, "This woman is hopelessly incurable," and that was it. And he was so cold. I was reduced to a baby and wearing diapers and being fed, and you know, I can't imagine it. I don't remember that, thank goodness, because it would haunt me in my dreams.
In Winnipeg, Val Orlico spends a lot of time tending her plants. It's one of the few hobbies she has left. She used to devour books and write long letters. Now she can't concentrate on a book for more than a single page, and writing a letter is beyond her. She's on medication 24 hours a day. If she wasn't married to David Orlico, an NDP member of Parliament, she might never have learned the full story of what happened to her.
That's very good. I better get out the tomatoes and the green pepper and...
In 1956, suffering from depression after childbirth, Mrs. Orlico was referred by her Winnipeg doctor to a top psychiatrist in Montreal. Unknowingly, she was about to become part of a cruel CIA experiment, codenamed MKUltra. In her room at Ravenscrag, Mrs. Orlico waited for her first treatment.
Well, I saw a tray with hypodermic, with a needle, a syringe, and the card on it had my name, so I looked a little more closely, and it was lysergic acid diethylamide. And my husband was a druggist, and I knew a lot of drugs, but I'd never heard of that one. And so I phoned a friend and who was a psychiatric nurse, and I said, do you know what it is? And she said, I never heard of it. But she had a friend who was a psychiatrist. So she phoned her friend, and she called me back, and she said, he said that this stuff causes poisonous psychosis. She said he said not to take it. Well, I thought, you know, he's a very Freudian psychiatrist and doesn't believe in any medication of any kind. And after all, here's Dr. Cameron. I mean, he's the big doctor, and he's, you know, he's known all over the world, and he wouldn't do anything that would harm me, etc. And so I took the injection, but I didn't like it. And it really did create a poisonous psychosis. Everybody in the hospital was very much in awe of Dr. Cameron, and he strode the halls like a giant. And people would say, oh, there but for God goes God. And to me, I thought, how could he possibly ever take me for a patient? Who am I? I mean, this great man who's done all these marvelous things, and boy, I better work hard, and I better do everything that he tells me to do, and, you know, I don't want to lose this opportunity to get well. But I never saw him once in all the times that I saw him that I wasn't afraid. Every time I went down to his office, I would shake with fear. And every time I'd see him coming down the hall, I'd shake with fear. But I adored him. The room became very distorted, and I thought my bones were all melting. And I just wanted to scream that I wanted to get out of there. And I saw the squirrels outside, and I thought, they're not the squirrels, I'm the squirrel. I'm in this cage, and I can't get out. And I started to throw myself from side to side in the room. And I couldn't write. They had given me a pencil and paper and asked me to write down, but I couldn't write. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't focus. I don't know, it was like some kind of funny hell I'd fallen into, and I couldn't get out. And I don't know how long that went on. It was just a terrible nightmare. And I just felt that my life was threatened. I could never go back to what I'd been. I can't take it anymore. I can't stand it. I don't think this is doing me any good. I feel worse. And he'd walk down the hall a little way with me and put his arm on my shoulder. And come on now, lassie, you know you're going to do it. And finally I'd say, well, okay. And off we'd go to my room, and he would give me another injection and then pat me on the shoulder, and off he'd be again. I had LSD, I believe, a total of 14 times. And sometimes there would be 4 days between the injections, and sometimes there would be one consecutive day after the other. And some of them I managed to write down things in my notes to Dr. Cameron.
In her hospital room, a terrified Mrs. Orlico tried to hide like a child at the sound of Dr. Cameron's approaching footsteps.
I heard him coming, and I hid in the washroom in my room. And I thought, well, I'll go and sit on the toilet. Nobody will see me. Anyhow, that didn't work because he knocked on the door and he said, now, come on, Lassie, you know you're in there, and come on, you come out and let me give you your injection. And I said, no, I'm not taking any more injections. I can't do it. I don't care if I die. I can't do it anymore because this is killing me, and that's all there is to it. I can't do it. Well, he wasn't very happy about it. And however, after a little discussion, he turned on his heel and left the room. There was another lady who had the same kind of psychic driving that I did, and she was a very wiry, slender lady, and with lots of pep and zip, you know, and she'd go to the dances and this and that. And one day she just wasn't there. And when we asked where she went, they said, oh, well, you know, she's gone to another hospital. Well, sometime later, I was in the day hospital, and I happened to ask a nurse if she'd heard what had happened to this lady. And she said, oh, that's her sitting over there. And I looked, and there was a fat lady that just looked like she was made out of dough. She didn't know me. She didn't know herself. She didn't know anybody. She was gone. Now that's a death. There was a gentleman who jumped off the roof of the Allan. I don't think he had LSD, but he had sleep therapy with psychic driving, you know, with the driving tapes under his pillow. And they told him he was going to go home. And he'd just come out of sleep therapy. And he just jumped, he said, went around, big smile on his face, said goodbye to everybody, went up on the roof and jumped off and landed at the back door of the Allan, which was a dreadful, awful thing. I don't think he was more than 30. And he was just gone. Just gone. And there was this big washed area at the back door. Nobody would go in and out of that back door for a long time. And everybody in the hospital spoke in hushed tones, and everybody was affected. They would not talk about it. It was as though it did not happen. I've heard that it was the most brutal program under MKUltra in the States and in Canada, that this was the most brutal. It was an awful feeling to realize when I found this out that the man whom I had thought cared about what happened to me didn't give a damn. I was a fly, just a fly. I've been hospitalized. When I first went home to Winnipeg, I attempted to take my own life because I couldn't endure the way I felt. And I have a chronic need. I'm very dependent on other people. And I have a chronic depression, which at times gets worse.
Her husband, David Orlico, NDP Member of Parliament for 22 years, remembers the cost.
We had Blue Cross coverage, but we didn't have, but Blue Cross did not cover treatment in a mental hospital. So what we did after the first year was to sell the house, which was really the only money that we had. And my daughter and I moved in with Al's mother. And we stayed there almost 3 years. It was tough, but the financial cost was really a small part of the cost. If you're talking about cost, it really disrupted our lives.
I've often, when I've been alone at home, thought, how can you fight the CIA? Who in heck do you think you are? How can you fight the CIA?
Like Mrs. Orlico, Mrs. Janine Huard of Montreal came to Dr. Cameron depressed after childbirth. The depression was made worse by a hearing problem that coincided with the birth of her child. She, too, was in awe of Dr. Cameron.
He was a very, very impressive man. And I was told he was the best doctor in North America, so he would look at you a few minutes, ask you a few questions, and then proceed with the treatments.
Mrs. Huard, like the others, was forced to pay for the so-called treatment, massive electric shocks, and all the drugs.
They would give me as much as 40 pills a day, and I would ask the nurse, what is that? They would say it's a new drug, and they only name it by a number.
What did all those drugs do to you? How did they make you
Well,
feel?
I was very, very strong, well-powered. So these drugs kind of desensitized me. They would lower my reactions. They would lower my resistance. I would try very strongly not to let my mind be capturing all the messages, but they would lower my resistance so much with the heavy drugs, but I couldn't do otherwise than listen.
Did you ever ask them how any of this was making you better?
No, I didn't ask questions. I was just say, I don't want to go through it again. And I would cry. I didn't want it, you know. I knew it. Way down in my heart, I knew it wasn't good. But, you know, how could you fight? You're in a hospital where it's supposed to be the best, with the best doctors. So, what can you do?
Did you ever try and get away from there? Did you ever say, I'm just not going back?
I tried. I was home for the weekend. And I had a pass for the weekend. That's how they call it. So when I was there, I said, I'm not going back there. So I telephoned, or somebody else in the house telephoned, and they said, if you're not coming back, we're sending the police after you. So I remember being so upset. I was crying. I didn't want to go in. And it was really like a concentration camp.
Why are you running away from your responsibilities, Janine? Why, Janine? Why?
Janine, why are you running
Why
away
are you
from
running
your
away from your
responsibilities?
responsibilities? Why are you running away from your responsibilities, Janine? Why are you running away? Why are you running away from your responsibilities? Why are you running away?
One thing which triggered Mrs. Huard's initial depression was growing deafness in one ear. That was later corrected with minor surgery. But no surgery can undo Dr. Cameron's work at Ravenscrag.
I cannot go to sleep without any medication. I have migraine headaches that last for a week at the time. Doctors cannot find the cause. I have slight amnesia. I have a lot of trouble to concentrate. Not being with my family, not being able to follow a career, not being able to study anymore, which I wanted to do very much. I would say it cost me my life.
sent to the Allan, which was the psychiatric ward of the Royal Vic. Every time I had the nitrous oxide, I felt like I was spinning into spinning without faster and faster, and I always thought, is this how it feels to die? And I never knew if I'd ever come out of it. And it really, I didn't like it. It really left me feeling very, very angry and very depressed afterward. And I didn't like all the pills that I was taking. I couldn't swallow them with water because they were always afraid that I wouldn't keep them down. So a nurse was always watching me until I swallowed them.
What can you tell us about Dr. Ewen Cameron?
He wasn't liked by the patients. We all stayed away from him. We all made beelines away from him whenever we saw him. We were terrified of him. Nobody really knew why, but we were all terrified of him. Once we were at the Allan, we didn't have a choice. We couldn't say, no, we don't want this. No. It was, you know, we were given medication and we had to take it. Some people I know were restrained to take because they didn't want their medication. They were restrained and they were forced to take the medication.
We were very surprised, of course, and angered, and I would say somewhat frustrated that nobody really intervened on these patients' behalf. Later on we found out that it was a collaborative work between the Canadian government and the American government, the CIA and the Canadian government, who actually condoned this experimentation on unknowing victims, actually. These patients were used. Gina was a ward of the state at that time and didn't have a voice and didn't have even a status. So it seemed that to have happened in our country was something really surprising and disappointing. I really am proud of her. I think she's just really, it's a human triumph. She just won. She came out of it in one piece.
Robert Logie of Vancouver was 18 when he came to the Allan complaining of trembling and severe leg pains, diagnosed as psychosomatic. Like Mrs. Orlico and Mrs. Huard, he had no inkling he was to be part of a CIA experiment.
The LSD was very horrifying, and they gave it to me for about 12 or 15 times. One minute I would see the doctor there, the next minute I wouldn't see him there, and they were asking me all kinds of questions, and I remember them telling me that I was getting smaller and smaller, and I really felt myself getting smaller. And they were bringing me back in time, way back, you know. At one point I almost felt like I was just about to be born, really, that far back in memory, and they were really probing, asking all kinds of questions, and I felt I didn't have any control. I had to answer. I didn't feel I had any control. I was completely, like they had complete control over me. For a while I thought, I don't want to stay here, and I started to run away from the hospital, and they grabbed me, and then they put me on sleep treatment. And they kept you asleep for 23 days. And while I was asleep, they were shocking the heck out of me with electric shocks and playing tapes. I've never been able to sleep without medication since the sleep treatment. I went through years and years and years of severe depressions. I dream about it. All my waking hours I think about it. It's eating me up.
Robert Logie was later given cortisone treatment for the pains in his leg that brought him to the Allan in the first place. It worked, but his mind is a different story. He now has joined with Mrs. Orlico, Madame Huard, and 6 other Canadians in a massive lawsuit against the United States government.
These are the days and hours are the occasions, and it is his mind, no less, which may destroy mankind.
Robert Logie was little more than a child himself when he was referred to Dr. Cameron. He was 18. He had a sore leg. His doctor thought it was all in his head and sent him to the Allan. Like Linda MacDonald, he went through a nightmare of shock therapy and drugs, including LSD.
Well, I was given LSD about every second day and injected. And sometimes it was mixed with sodium amytal and other drugs.
Most of the drugs were experimental, but seemed suitable for brainwashing, or as Cameron preferred to call it, depatterning. Then, during the long sleep, the patient would be forced to listen to subliminal messages that were supposed to print new, sometimes bizarre thoughts on his blank mind.
I was aware of the speaker under my pillow. I was aware of the words.
Which were?
You killed your mother.
You killed your mother.
Yeah.
Who was alive and well.
Who was alive and well. And
over and over again, this voice is done.
Well, like I say, it takes about 2 seconds to say that message. And this was going on for 23 days. And when I went home, after being there, and when I went home, my mother was there, and why was she there? And it didn't make any sense.
A lot of people are saying, considering the accepted practice and the science available at the time, this was an appropriate thing to do to you. What?
It wasn't treatment, if that's what you're suggesting. It wasn't treatment for anything, not a toenail or anything. It was out and out guinea pigs for brainwashing experiments. That's what it was.
Dr. Elliot Emanuel knew Cameron.
He was an authoritarian, ruthless, power-hungry, nervous, tense, angry man. Not very nice. As you probably know, electroshock treatment has been given for depression for something like 40 years now. It's a very successful and useful treatment for severe depression that doesn't respond to other things. But depatterning is a use of electroshock treatment in a totally different way, in which instead of giving the shocks, say, 2 or 3 times a week, they're given 2 or 3 times a day. for 3 or 4 weeks, reducing the patient to a sort of animal, vegetable state, from which it's hoped that they would recover in a more healthy state of mind. It didn't work.
How did those patients regard, or apparently regard, Dr. Cameron?
Those patients were too far gone. The ones that were not too far gone were terrified of him. We were all terrified to see him around. We didn't want to be near him. I don't think that any patient ever wanted to be close to Dr. Cameron.
The Fifth Estate.
I'm Adrienne Clarkson. Tonight we report on a secret CIA research project carried out in Montreal in which mental patients felt they were used as the CIA's guinea pigs.
They kept you asleep for 23 days. And while I was asleep, they were shocking the heck out of me with electric shocks.
Could break.
9 Canadians who were the unwitting victims of CIA brainwashing experiments are suing the United States government. But so far, the Canadian government has done nothing to help them.
If I were in charge of a government to whom 9 citizens that we are suing for have been brainwashed without their knowing, have had their lives impaired, and have it done by a foreign agency, undercover without the government of Canada knowing it, I would find a way to help those people instead of hindering them.
U.S., a former CIA director, Stansfield Turner, promised the Congress the agency would try and track down victims of the MKUltra project in both Canada and the U.S. so they might get compensation.
I was tired, I was depressed, my back was hurting. And so he said to the children's father, why don't you go to Montreal and visit this Dr. Ewen Cameron, this famous man who has all of these accolades, and have an assessment. So we went. My medical file even says that I took my guitar with me. And that was the end of my life. Within 3 weeks, Dr. Cameron decided to call me an acute schizophrenic and ship me up to the sleep room.
How long did they put you to sleep for?
I was in a coma for 86 days.
86 days of unbroken sleep.
Yeah. Total comatose state.
The movie called The Sleep Room dramatizes one technique for brainwashing. Extreme sessions of electroshock therapy, massive jolts of electricity 3 or 4 times a day for weeks. According to her hospital records, Linda MacDonald had 100 of these treatments. She entered hospital for treatment of what we can now guess was postpartum depression. Her records show the results of shock and radical drug therapy. May 15th shows some confusion. June 3rd knows her name, but that's about all. June 11th doesn't know her name.
I had to be toilet trained. I was a vegetable. I had no identity, I had no memory, I'd never existed in the world before. Like a baby, just like a baby that has to be toilet trained.
She eventually went home, her depression gone, and her entire previous life gone with it.
And this is one of the twins. That was in '62 before I went to the Allan. And this is the same one, I think. I just look at the pictures and I know who that is, who they are, but I don't remember them as my children at all. I mean, I know that they came from my body, But there's no, that's all. I don't know, and that's because I was told that. So these are my children. Consent had nothing to do with it. Dr. Cameron did not describe the treatment. He did not clarify. He did not give any way, shape, or form any kind of a hint of what was going to happen. That's not consent. And I don't even know whether he talked to me, because I'll never remember anyway.
When she discovered that her own government had been funding brainwashing experiments on her, she made a dramatic decision.
You decided to take on the government of Canada.
Oh, sure. Well, hey, considering what I'd already been through, that was a snap. You know, what else? Why not?
It must have become obvious to you fairly quickly that you were ramming your head into a brick wall.
Yes. I'm stubborn, too. It got to the point where every time, whether it was John Crosby or Raina Titian or then the Honorable Kim Campbell, it got to be, you guys, we're gonna stay alive. And I said that to Brian Mulrooney, too. If you think I'm going away, you've got another thing coming. I'm not going to go away. There I am. Look at me. Did they call me Linda? Yeah. I am who I am today. My family tells me that I am very much like the Linda that they knew when I was growing up. Gregarious, always talking, laughing, singing, happy, positive person. I have no memory of that person. All I'm grateful for is that Cameron might have been able to wipe a memory, but he couldn't wipe a spirit.
Okay, and I would like to begin by just acknowledging that this public consultation and my presentation is happening on the unceded Indigenous territory of Jojage, and that the Ganyan-Gayaga, or the Mohawk First Nation, is the custodian of these lands and waters. Now, my name is Donovan King, and I'm a historian, a teacher, and a tour guide. About 10 years ago, one of the survivors of the Allan Memorial Institute approached me, and she told me the story of, unmarked graves being hidden, behind the Allan Memorial Institute. And I just wanted to read a quote from her, what she told us. And she said, "These unmarked graves are a big secret. There has been no physical proof that kids are buried there, but some would have been First Nations kids in Cameron's experiments between 1953 and 1964. Others came from broken homes or were orphans. Obviously, they're not laid out to attract attention, but we think 17 to 25 children were buried there. Officially, though, it never happened. Many, many records were destroyed, however, and McGill has been very busy hiding the evidence and making sure witnesses and survivors remain silent."
Gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, wehiyo, hawi hawi ne gai na we are here. Gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, wehiyo, hawi hawi ne gai na we are here. Gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, wehiyo, hawi hawi ne gai na we are here. Gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, wehiyo, hawi hawi ne gai na we are here. Gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, wehiyo, hawi hawi ne gai na we are here. Gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, wehiyo, hawi hawi ne gai na we are here. Gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, wehiyo, hawi hawi ne gai na we are here. Gayuwani gayuwe, gayuwani gayuwe, wehiyo, hawi hawi ne gai na we are here. No heyo, no heyane, no hayo gai na we are here. We heyane, we heyane, no hayo. Yone no hayo, no heyo, no heyane, no hayo gai na we are. Yone no hayo, no heyo, no heyane, no hayo ga na we are heya. We heyane, we heyane, no hayo. Yone no hayo, no heyo, no heyane, no hayo ga na we are heya. No hayo, no heyo, no heyane, no hayo ga na we are heya. We heyane, no hayo. Yone no hayo, no heyo, no heyane, no hayo ga na we are heya. Yone no hayo, no heyo, no heyane, no hayo ga na we are heya. We heyane, no hayo. Yone no hayo, no heyo, no heyane, no hayo ga na we are heya.
CIA documents show that 53 people in Montreal were subjected to the MKUltra experiments, but only 9 of those have been positively identified. Apart from Orlico, Huard, and Logie, there were 3 Montreal housewives, one of whom is now institutionalized. There's a Montreal businessman who never really got his life together again after the experiments, and another man who's been destitute for most of the time since. Ironically enough, one of the victims is now a psychiatrist practicing in Eastern Ontario. She obviously functions well enough, but after the experiments, 10 years of her memory was wiped right out.
Yet to this day, neither the US nor Canada has ever said we're sorry.
You can be damn sure that if this had happened in Canada to the wife of an American senator or congressman, the American public would be riled as unbelievable. And there would be pressure on Canada that would be very substantial. Where's my country? Where's my country in this? I don't know. And it hurts, and it makes me angry.